Welcome to the portal to New Sovereign Earth, an interdimensional landing strip for beings who know their power. Come, collaborate, learn, and co-create our collective heaven on Earth. Brought to you by Tempus Aquaria, where you can find exclusive members-only content like events, shows, classes, and even invites to on-site retreats. You'll learn everything you need to know in order to build the new sovereign Earth. I'm your host, Kalina Lux. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and turn notifications on. Okay, well, hello and welcome back to The Portal. This is episode 3, and I'm really excited today because we have had a long-awaited guest appearance today. I know that many of you have been waiting for the official Azylem and TheObjectiveAlpha interview today, and I am hoping that there's going to be a little bit of something for everybody here. First off, I think that we're going to try and start it off real mellow so that basically anybody that's coming in wanting to learn a little bit about why this might mean something to you, we're going to start it off there and then we're going to flow. And I'm just going to give you guys fair warning. The amount of information that these two gentlemen possess is like really intense and it's actually very, very high level. So we're hoping to kind of tailor it, and I'm going to be here to ask clarifying questions. And essentially, you're going to get to go on my journey as I get to learn from these two guys. They have done extensive amounts of research in the DERO community, and it's really exciting to see what they've come up with and to hear what they've learned and to try and understand it. Because I do think that it is part of our sacred duties to learn this stuff, at least to a little, like a small percentage, so that we have a basic understanding of how to protect ourselves. Ultimately, at the end of the day, it is everybody's responsibility to protect your privacy and to protect your data. And the OA and Azylem are here to talk about how we can use DERO to do that. And so I am going to share my screen here in a little bit, and I'm just going to pull up the show notes. So we already kind of went over this to a certain extent. We went over a little bit of this graphic that I'm about to pull up and share on my screen right now. And I think that it's a great place to start because most people really don't get what's going on. They really just don't see why. And these guys are going to share about it right now. Let me pull up my screen. And I'm also going to turn my camera off, so I'm just an icon too. Boom. All right. Whoa. Here we go. All right. Is this visible on the screen to you guys?
Yes, it is. Indeed.
Okay. Awesome. All right. So, Azylem, you made this beautiful infographic, and I'm pretty impressed because the amount of information and mastery you have to create something like this is massive. So, do you want to just walk us through some main points of this?
The main point that I wanted to get to really quickly with this graphic specifically was to meet people where they are, really, and show them that it's already clear in statistics and questionnaires all over the world pretty much that people do want data privacy, and they also feel that they don't have it. Of course, you'd have to look in a lot of different areas to find out where those people are, what areas they're missing that comfort in their data privacy, obviously. Pew Research does a lot of these questionnaires over the years, and in 2019 specifically, they asked some good questions that I really liked, so I pulled those and kind of made a graphic out of them.
Yeah, excellent. So right here it shows 81% of us, like, we have no control. We feel we have no control about our data. And most people just click those things. And one of the things that I've learned recently is that anytime that you click one of those agreements, the user agreements or the little like electronic boxes, we are kind of trained to think, oh, just click it and get it over with. And nobody even reads it like it shows here in your infographic. But also, what I learned recently in the law perspective is that those put you in a different jurisdiction outside of your country. They actually put you in a jurisdiction of the UN and the Vatican via Unidroit. And should there ever be any kind of, like, if you need to raise a question with them or to take them to court, you don't get to. They get to choose who will oversee your case. So that's another thing I don't think people really realize. But yeah, so one of the things I really felt was super important that people just don't get, like myself included. I know about all the psyopy shit, but I still can't fully wrap my brain around how these people are able to harness such amounts of data and then use that as a tool and a weapon for social engineering. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. The thing about the way that we use the internet currently is the orientation of information is server facing. The way the entire internet works is basically extracting information out of the user and then giving the user back whatever the user wants to see or do on the internet. The problem with this orientation is as soon as the user interacts with anything on the internet, that information leaves their personal domain and is uploaded to some server or servers on the internet. And over the years, over lifetimes, you end up with massive troves of data from everybody's life that is not under the control of the people that created that data, the users. And you can look at this a few different ways. Let's just make a hypothetical scenario here. Say government A, company A, and company B all have deals with each other for making rules, making laws on how the data is to be handled and all this stuff. Who stands over those people to stop them from using that data for other things that the user didn't ask for? The answer is nobody. We see it in the news all the time that data gets hijacked or exploited from hackers or leaks. And all this stuff. When these things happen, a lot of analysis can be done even by people in the public that don't work for these corporations or governments. Since this data is so exposed and all over the world, you can draw all kinds of conclusions on people that would allow you to manipulate them. It isn't really that complex. It's just that most people are so used to thinking when they agree to a privacy agreement that their data is somehow magically secure, and that's just false because it's inherently exposed to the entire world, whether it's encrypted or not, as soon as they interact or create that data.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that you bring up a really valid point right there, that we have entrusted third parties because it makes us feel as though it's safe and secure, but really we're just kind of giving them full permission to do whatever they want with our data. And we really don't know what they're doing, if they're cataloging things and then clearly creating socially engineered tactics by way of me over Alpha. I think you were going to say something there.
Yeah, well, that is that privacy policy that generally comes up on your screen and you don't read it, you just tick it and it goes away. You're effectively consenting to all of this that's happening. But how they have you over the barrel is generally these are private companies that are offering you a service. Right. So to use Google's search engine, they're offering you that service. But now you can see, as obviously things in law have obviously changed over the past decade. But now every time you want to go to Google, you have to click I agree to everything that's on that page that pops up in front of you. So this is how it's done. It's ultimately done by consent. It's a private company has built a private service and you want to use it because it's in the public. So that's how we're in this situation, in this scenario. So can you get a platform where something's built, where these private companies build their services, but it's a place where you don't have to tick a privacy policy box because you already know? But yeah, I just wanted to touch on how that comes about, is ultimately these private companies offer services, and in exchange for you using this free service, it's your data.
Yeah, I think those are really great points. And I think the common person, whether they're coming in off the street and they've never even considered holding crypto or they're against it, I think that we can all agree at this point that there is something very serious that needs to be done in regards to these violations of our privacy. Azylem, in our last chat, you really painted the picture saying, if they had access to everything about you, they knew your medical conditions, they knew your opinions, your beliefs, if you had just broken up with your boyfriend or whatever, and they were able to sell you something, but it goes beyond just selling. I do think that this can be used for political purposes, or even like we're seeing these days with the massive, I guess I would say, the depolarization of natural alchemical cycles that we're seeing in the mainstream. But to bring it back to DERO, how does DERO provide a solution for this?
What we're proposing is to change the orientation of the data. It's not facing the world when a user creates a bit of information, or like types in a few numbers or a message to interact with the service. If you can rebase all the information that each individual users need to use in order to function on the internet in a private way so that only the user has access to their own information and it can still interact, then we've effectively distributed all the information of all people in the world to their own control instead of to centralized authorities all over the world. Instead of trusting the rest of the internet with your information, now you can just store it in a permanently encrypted, trustless state and interact with those services trustlessly and privately, only giving information that is your choice to give to the world. I wouldn't say that this is all intentional. The way that it was designed may be naive from the get-go over the last few decades, but we've learned a lot of lessons watching what's happened in the world, watching what happens when you have decades of information on people. Are people even people anymore, or is everything in their head just comprised of feedback from all the information they've ever divulged over the internet? These questions start just expanding infinitely in scope. It's hard to nail down what an individual even is in that environment,
Yeah, I like that because, you can only be, a sum of your inputs. So if all of your inputs, everything you feed into your senses, your eyes, your ears, your mouth, is completely controlled by entities that, let's say, inspired by monetary gain, then surely your outputs are controlled, what you are. So that's kind of what Azylem's getting at, right? It's
Yeah.
You give all your data away, everyone's going to know exactly what you are and, how to manipulate you, how to control your outputs, control what comes out of your mouth, control what you type on the computer when you're sat there typing.
I really urge people to sit with this and think about this because it's really happening. And even for somebody like myself, who's quite aware of multiple psyops, it is very hard to conceptualize that with these behemoth companies that have so much access to data and they can just pull graphs and see all the trends and see exactly how they can Hegelian dialect you or problem reaction solution you into whatever it is that they want. I mean, of course, we're talking moral implications of violations of free will, with the exception that you clicked consent. And so I guess to tie it a little bit of the spirituality part of there, that doesn't apply anymore, right? The applications karmically don't apply to them because you gave them permission. You guys touched on a few things there that I would love some clarification. And just to let you know, it just started torrential downpour here. So if I lose my signal, just keep going. And I think it'll still record on your end, but I think it should be okay. So one of the things that you guys spoke about is the concept of trustlessness. Would you guys go over and explain for us what trust and trustlessness means and how that applies to DERO?
When all of your calculations and all your data retention and all your meaning being derived from information is done by a central authority, you create a scenario where everybody in the world has to trust those central authorities with whatever that meaning is, which is a pretty big problem when you expand the scope to finance, politics. For example, when you log into your bank account on an app, say, you're not looking at a number that you created. You're not looking at a number that was created by something that you're in control of. You're literally logging into an app to be told how much money you have. You have no control over that. So that there's like this weird concept that we figured the internet with. We shed all of our data and shed all responsibility for it to be told who and what we are and having no control over what any of that is. So when it comes to trust or trustlessness, if you have no control in the consensus of that information, then you are what you're told you are. Everything about you is what you're told is about you. So the whole concept of blockchain was to distribute that data and distribute that computation in such a way that every user has the capability of coming to their own conclusions and deriving their own meaning and their own facts from the history of the chain instead of being told, instead of having to trust that number. Now you can actually participate in the consensus of the calculations themselves, the data history itself, and derive your own meaning from the history of that information based on what you also don't divulge to the rest of the internet, since this is also a private blockchain.
Yeah, so You're effectively, how blockchain comes into it is it's a computer protocol ultimately, and you can know and you can see how that protocol operates without ever being able to be changed. So, that's just very basically and generally in blockchain, that's how blockchain itself kind of takes away trust. You don't need to now trust closed source, human controlled systems that are centrally controlled, where one individual human can do any changes to any protocol that you happen to be using. Whereas now we've, switched to open source and just protocols where no individual human has any intervention, and you can trustlessly trust that what you input is going to have this output. And then you can add on top of that, where DERO then comes in, is with homomorphic encryption, as you can put your data in the hands of nodes and know that they will not have access to that data or be able to change the integrity of that data in a way that you don't want it to be. This is trust and trustlessness. It's how and where you're placing your trust and what you're placing it in.
A node is basically like your own personal assistant that does precisely what it's programmed to do. And you don't even have to trust the rest of the nodes on a network. Your own node, you can watch it. You can even try to mess with it if you wanted to try to break encryption or break consensus. But to break the trustlessness of a decentralized system, you would have to somehow beat the consensus, which is statistically improbable. You can go a lot deeper than that. But.
Okay, so I can make sure I'm understanding. Trusted is when you have to use a third party and you have to give them the raw data unencrypted so that they can run whatever calculations it is on there or retrieve whatever data there is to be able to tell you. And that's a problem because it's centralized, like with Alchemy and Infura, and they're like a gatekeeper in a way. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And trustlessness means that it's just a series of mathematical, I guess, I don't even know what you'd call them, but mathematical computations that create this system so that you don't have to decrypt the data and you're able to do it all locally on your own wallet or node. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, that's amazing. That is amazing that DERO provides that. And I think it's going to be a concept I'll have to revisit to really have it hit home. So one of the things that we talked about previously that I felt like would be a really great topic to input right now, Alpha, you spoke about blockchains and what a blockchain is. I think that you and I share a couple communities, particularly with the Crow people, that just hear this word and are automatically triggered. But I was re-listening to our talk the last time, and the way you explained blockchain was really elegant. It took the mystery out of it, and it helped me at least understand what this really was in the most simplistic way. Could you share a little bit about what even is a blockchain?
Yes, ma'am. Okay. Basically, blockchain seems to be, from my observation, the answer very simply to infinite money printing in the financial system, in the economy that we are all used to. Very simply, going back to trustlessness, it is a computer protocol that is open source, so you can see how it functions. You can verify, right? Don't trust, verify. You can verify how it functions. And so it seems to have come out from the financial, air quotes, crisis of 2006, 2007, 2008, where a major issue and a major point of contention that came out of it is the government can infinitely print money. So Bitcoin obviously came out of that. You cannot infinitely print this crypto coin we call Bitcoin. Secondary to that, I would say, from my observation, is data integrity is something that come out of this. So the immutability of the blockchain ledger. So it means that you cannot go back in time and change data. You cannot go back in time and make alterations to, let's say, critical financial information. That is a secondary thing that's come out of it. In general, that's why blockchain seems to have been created. It's just a reaction to the financial system, this fractional reserve system that we find ourselves in.
And essentially, you're saying that the blockchain is really just a way to calculate and store data or financial data. So it's not something scary. It's just kind of like a fancy piece of accounting, right?
Yeah, exactly. Trustless accounting. You're not having to place your trust in private entities, which ultimately all corporations are, and they are centrally controlled. You're able to place your financial transactions and data into a system that is trustless. You know, it's a computer protocol that's designed to work in a very specific way.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, it's not centrally controlled, it's decentralized, as in it is controlled by a network of nodes that try to keep consensus. And so that's the major breakthrough ultimately of what Bitcoin was. It's keeping nodes, so all across the world that are connected via the internet, keeping them all in consensus, all in agreement that this is quite unique. What Bitcoin brought us was special, of course.
In our last chat, we talked about Bitcoin's pseudo-anonymity and how all of crypto is kind of in this sleepwalking state, thinking that they're participating in something that's already keeping their data private. Do you guys want to expand on that and how that's just a complete myth?
Yeah, so before you know what pseudo-anonymity is you think it's anonymity, aka on the blockchain, you create your wallet on the blockchain and you have this string of letters and numbers. And you're like, wow, that's amazing. I'm not this string of letters and numbers. No one's ever going to know that that's me in real life, me sat here. So the problem has basically arisen at some point, in order to allow this string of letters and numbers, this blockchain, to interact with, let's call it the real world where we operate in the current financial system, you're going to have to connect your real world self to that wallet, that string of letters and numbers. Yeah, so it is anonymous on the blockchain online, but it's not anonymous because you've told an entity, as we've just gone over, you think your data that you've sent to this entity is private and safe and secure, when in actuality it's most likely not. And it can and will be leaked eventually. So you've effectively connected yourself in the real world to this string of letters and numbers on the blockchain. So it's pseudo-anonymity. You're anonymous to a point.
I think that's actually maybe even potentially more dangerous because in one sense, we know when we're being monitored and surveilled, but people who believe that they are acting in private, they might act in different ways. I personally, I have the rare ability to live out in the middle of nowhere. And I tell you, my life is way different here as opposed to when I was living in an apartment in San Diego, right? Mostly I just play my music louder and sing like a fool, but the point still stands is that my behaviors are very different when I believe that I have complete privacy. And I feel like that's something that is really important for people to take home here. Azylem, we were speaking about what the setbacks of blockchain are and why blockchain hasn't really even taken off yet. And you guys had an incredible dialogue, and I wish that I had recorded some of that. But would you guys give us a little synopsis about the failures of blockchain up until now and some of those solutions that we see with DERO?
Sure. I'll just add on a little bit about the pseudo-anonymity points first.
Yeah.
When you think about what we were talking about earlier with divulging information in order to interact with services or with anything on the internet, really, without privacy, such as in DERO's case, let's talk about Bitcoin or Ethereum for a second. With pseudo-anonymity, your information is still public. It's just detached from you without some kind of analysis on all of that data in order to pin it to you. It's still public, is what I'm saying, which can lead to surveillance, censorship. Let's give an example of censorship here. You have the majority of hash rate on the Bitcoin network being provided by a few entities, not very many, 3 or 4. Maybe they provide the majority of the hash rate. In that environment, any information that is known about you as a user, you could, in theory, issue an order to those mining entities to entirely ignore a transaction that comes from your wallet, which is bad because it's no longer permissionless in this environment because the information is public. If you can be censored because of information that's derived about you and pinned to a specific wallet address on a network, then it is not permissionless. It's not censorship resistant, and it's not surveillance resistant. It's all based on surveillance. This causes a whole new world of issues like we're starting to see with the Tornado Cash events, for example. If the concept of tainted coins can even exist on a network, then 1 unit does not equal 1 unit, and therefore it is not fungible. And if it is not fungible, it's actually less useful than a cash bill, which just makes this conversation even weirder. Like, for example, why are we spending so much effort trying to distribute this technology that's less useful than cash?
Yeah.
The entire reason it was built in the first place was to replace it. It doesn't make any sense to me, anyways. That kind of feeds into why the whole world didn't dive head first into blockchain tech, is what I'm trying to get at. That's one of the reasons. Another reason would be the difficulty in performing tasks or responsibilities on a chain in the first place. Let's just take Bitcoin again, for example, here. In order to know your balance just on the Bitcoin network, how many Bitcoin you own or your wallet owns. In order to do that, without believing another trusted entity that's sitting there surveilling you 24 hours a day, you have to literally scan the entire history of the chain to populate your balance number, which is quite a responsibility overhead if you want to leverage the trustlessness of that network, which, just for anybody that doesn't know, that actually takes probably an entire day for you to do. You can't just plug an app into the Bitcoin network and know what your balance is. All the people that think you can do that are actually trusting a third party again, which is not the solution here, not the point of what Bitcoin was built to do. And likewise with the majority of blockchains. So let's move on to Ethereum for a second. Ethereum has an account model for the Ethereum asset. You can, in theory, have your wallet connect to a node, which likely isn't yours, likely isn't under your control, and ask it what your balance is. That can be done in a few seconds, just like you can on Bitcoin when you're connecting to a third party that's surveilling you. The same stuff happens on the Ethereum network, but the majority of what Ethereum is used for is not for its native asset. Its native asset is used for paying for computation that is being done on other assets. So let's take another asset on Ethereum. ERC20 tokens, for example, are contracts that run in the Ethereum virtual machine that keep track of who owns how many tokens there are, and the history of those assets is stored on the blockchain, on an Ethereum blockchain. In order to trustlessly acquire your balance of a token on the Ethereum chain, you have to go back to what I said earlier about scanning the entire chain to compute that information, or you trust a third party again. All these concepts that we've been talking about for years in blockchain, trying to justify why we're doing all this, it kind of gets lost in translation because everything keeps circling back to trusting a third party. Not a whole lot of people want to talk about this stuff, and most people that do get shot down on social media, for example. Well, I could list a whole lot of names that happens to. It seems to me that the desire for financial gain is so huge that it takes the center of everybody's perception of what crypto is, and they continue divulging their information and continue asking third parties to take over and provide them what they want off these blockchains in order to use these networks. It's a shame.
It's a blockchain version of what we were speaking about earlier, where you have these private companies and they ask you to click their privacy policy with all of this shit in it that you don't want to read. Well, it's effectively the same thing with node access to a blockchain, isn't it? Fura, was giving you this lovely service, just instant balance syncing. They already know what all the smart contracts on all of Ethereum, they know all the balances, and they just pop it up in your MetaMask wallet just like that. What are they getting in return? Does Infura just do this for free? Or is there data involved? Are you running all of your blockchain operations through their node? So it's effectively the same thing. And as Azylem's pointing to, it's probably all ultimately financially incentivized, because it seems to be the system we live in right now, where monetary gain is above all else.
So when it comes to DERO, what DERO brings to the table is a unique set of features that kind of nullifies all of these problems that existed so far in the blockchain space and actually gives us a stepping stone to building an actual decentralized and private internet, which is something that no other blockchain to date has been able to provide. Some of the features that come together to let us do something like that would be, for example, the account model that we described earlier. Ethereum also has the account model, but it does not support assets natively that are contract-based, which means the public can't come in and permissionlessly use this network without relinquishing some control to centralized authorities for their users to use it in a usable manner, I should say. By creating a layer 1 private network that has native asset support inside that private environment, these are assets that can be created using contracts, which are trustless. You create a system where all the necessary third-party centralization is no longer required for a user to actually function without spending a day every time they set up to do something. It actually only takes a couple seconds on the DERO network.
I'm really grateful that you're willing to go over that. You taught me about this, and you really helped me understand how these two entities are literally scouring through, tracking and tracing every single crypto transaction with the aside from maybe, Monero and DERO, because they are basically gatekeeping all this data. They can just be like, oh, we don't like what you did over there. Guess what? Your entire account is frozen. You can never make a transaction again.
They do this by exerting control. Say a wallet is tainted. They can't shut your wallet down. They can't lock your wallet. But what they can do is issue orders to entities that they do control that users are required to interact with, like exchanges or third-party data providers. They can issue orders to them to censor you because your information is public. And if your information wasn't public, then that entire series of abuses, I would say, wouldn't be possible.
There you go. And then for me, it draws up the question of, is an immutable platform, a ledger of data, a great thing if that data isn't private?
I would say no. I think it's worse than what we had before.
It effectively is time travel. It means any entity, any authoritative entity in the future can effectively reach back as far into time as that ledger will allow them and see what was happening. Just because you slipped up once, 20 years down the line, and accidentally, I don't know, put the seed into a wallet on a compromised machine 20 years later, and because all of that immutable, linkable data was on that blockchain for all of this time, they can effectively reach back in time and say, hey, you.
Yeah, I would go as far to say that the people that are really resistant to crypto and blockchain are resistant for this exact reason. They see that there's a massive problem with cataloging all of our data for infinity to be held against us at any point in time. And that's why I think that they're going to be so interested and relieved to find DERO like I was. And I can't remember what the last question was that I asked you guys, but because I know that I'm probably going to drop signal real quick here. The next two questions is, what are the reasons that blockchain has failed in terms of having to carry around all the luggage like we were talking about last time? And you guys were talking about living on the tip of the chain, which is something that's so exclusive to DERO. And I've been really trying to wrap my brain around it. Do you guys want to talk on that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So having a private account model chain that is permanently encrypted and supports native assets and supports two-way communication over the network, you effectively only need one block to do anything. You don't need the entire chain's history in order to function. I can theorize a little bit. I could see a point in DERO's future where everybody's running pruned node that can be bootstrapped in a matter of minutes, which means, in essence, everybody runs their own local calculations trustlessly on their own node, and then has access to all of their information while discarding the entire history of the chain. This creates a new kind of phenomenon of everybody living right at the very tip of the chain instead of spread over time throughout its history, because all information that is required in order to perform any action on the chain exists at the very tip. This, in effect, creates sort of a platform where you can create all kinds of new internet protocols, all kinds of new services and platforms on top of this thing that gives everybody trustless privacy. That's something that's never happened before. It's hard to see past where we are right now to know where this goes, because it is all dependent on what developers use it for, or any developer from the public for that matter. For me personally, for example, I had no need of the history of the chain. All I need is 1 kilobyte of information from the most recent block to do the dozen things I do every day on the DERO chain. That's unheard of. That adds a lot to the usability factor, for example, not needing any trusted third parties, not divulging any information publicly, and not having a high responsibility overhead as a user to use it trustlessly and privately. Again, all these things have never existed on any other chain in the history of crypto.
That is really phenomenal. And it really paints the picture that you guys were talking about last time, how, and I was pondering on this morning. I was in the sauna and it was amazing. I was listening to our lecture and I was really trying to ponder on how you guys mentioned that DERO really isn't meant to compete with other cryptos. It's not even meant to compete with other privacy coins. Would you say it's accurate to say that DERO, the purpose of DERO is in fact to rebuild the internet and repair our mistakes of the last 20 years in regards to the privacy and the surveillance situation? Would you say that that's more accurate?
Of course. All of these things together gives us a platform to literally reinvent the internet in a way that we've never seen before.
I am very curious to know more about Graviton DB. We got into it just a teensy bit in our talk and the last one. And would you guys be able to share what that is and how it's just above everything we've seen to date in terms of databases in crypto?
Yeah, so ultimately what a database is where, data is kept. So if you can imagine a large volume of data, from what I've observed, and now I'm just, looking at this myself in the last few weeks, how you access that data is critical. How it's actually stored, how it's broken up, the pieces that it's broken up into, and how it's stored in the database has obviously a huge effect on just how you access it, how quick it is, how easily the data is traversed when you're trying to find something. From what I've learned and what I've seen is databases, which effectively is what a blockchain is just that it's a database. It's very important and it's very critical how that's structured is exactly what is mirrored in the end product, in the blockchain itself. So in DERO, Graviton database was made for DERO network from scratch and operates seemingly different to any and all databases, blockchain-based databases before it. Something that is very interesting is the accounts and the transactions are kept separate. And this is actually what helps to enable the fast sync mechanism. Accounts and transactions are saved in Graviton as separate entities that can be broken apart because one isn't necessary for the other. If all you want to do is keep track of the numbers in an account, DERO network and Graviton specifically allows you to do that. Yeah, if you want the account, but with all transactions involved in and around, Graviton, due to how it's saved in the database, allows you to do that. And this allows fantastic features such as fast sync on the DERO network. When you fast sync, you're just syncing and verifying the accounts themselves without the transactions. And that can be done because they are in the database as separate entities. And the thing that makes this really cool about DERO is the smart contracts, the native assets. Because those assets are native to the L1, the assets that are put out from the smart contract, they are actually in the account. This fast sync goes for everything on the blockchain. it's a tough one to explain, but it's critical. It's crucial. So I'm studying databases and blockchain and Graviton as we speak. And, I will be doing my own write-up about it for the community and just so we can start learning about these things. But Graviton in itself is very unique, very special, and it allows DERO network to be what it is. Bitcoin and Ethereum both use a database called LevelDB. It's old. From what I've seen and what I've learned, databases is data corruption is a critical issue. All of these kind of functions and things are something that the developers of the DERO network have looked at. They identified issues. They attempted to build smart contract composability with the CryptoNote blockchain. And there were severe lackings in the available databases that could be used that specifically didn't allow the homomorphic encryption blockchain protocol or just smart contracts on CryptoNote itself to be possible. And that needed a change in the database and its structure and how it was created.
These verified account states that are stored in each block effectively serve a trustless substitute for using a third party to gain access to your information. Instead of needing third parties to run analysis, populate balances, and provide heuristics on the network, it's all stored in the database, and Graviton allows all this.
Graviton, I feel, is almost as special as DERO itself. It's something that I will look to try and shine a light on, really try and explain it for everyone to be able to comprehend. All right, it's cool. Verifications on every individual piece. If you verify everything individually, that means it can be modular. It can be broken down into its individual chunks. And that's a benefit of this account-based model is like every individual state. I do not believe that's the case. It's why you need to scan an entire UTXO blockchain for its history because each UTXO isn't verified. They're not trustable. Something can go wrong. And if you don't know the whole history, you cannot verify that is what it is. In the Graviton, everything individually having its own proof is great. And it allows so many functions.
So in our earlier talk, you guys had mentioned a concept that I felt really helped simplify it. And I have to admit, I'm not quite fully understanding it, but you were talking about how FastSync works by essentially just looking in the box, right? You had the metaphor for your money is in the box and the number of your money is in the box. And all you needed to do is see that somehow in order for FastSync. Could you guys elaborate on that?
Yeah, so we're just really basically, I suppose, it's just summing up what an account model is. An account model is effectively a box, and in that box is a number. And the only thing on blockchain that can happen is the number goes up or the number goes down via addition or subtraction. The bottom line function, that's the only thing that can happen in that account. So that's all that needs to be kept track of with verification. That's how your account balances are instantly synced. So that goes to what Azylem was saying, is living on the tip of the chain. You don't need to know the whole history of the chain to know that account balance in that last block, in that final state, is the verified, accurate, true balance. Ultimately, when you break it down, it's very simple. It's an account, and number go up or number go down in the account. And, this account model, I believe, is ultimately what made the encryption system possible.
And everything in that box or account is also verified, meaning all assets. You could have not infinite, but effectively infinite amount of assets in an account in that box. And the only thing you need for as a user to do anything on the network is to connect to the node and fetch your box, which is your public key. When the information is passed back from the node to the wallet that is listed under that public key, the user uses their private key to open the box and see what's in it. And all of your native assets are in it. So you can live at the tip of the chain, basically.
Quick access to information. So it makes it usable in the real world.
And that goes back to why hasn't blockchain been globally adopted? Well, this never existed before, but now it does.
There you go. So if we compare this directly to Ethereum, where it seems like your tokens, populate almost instantly in your MetaMask wallet. Well, this goes back to using third-party trusted nodes. No, they're providing you the service of making sure that those tokens pop up really quickly in your wallet. Otherwise, you probably wouldn't use MetaMask, who's also owned by the same company. you know? Like,
and the kicker there is they only know what that number is because the information is public.
there you go. So you
They're,
can
they're
third party.
surveilling you as a service.
Yeah, they're doing what effectively you are too lazy to do, which is, sync up a full node and scan everything everywhere at all times, because that is a bit of maybe not ideal. Yeah, they're basically private companies offering you a private service, as is the legacy system. So that's why these fucking modern blockchains, they're effectively the same thing, just with their baseline settlement layers is this open source blockchain, but your access to it isn't, right? It's access to the thing. That's why you see in the DERO community, it's very, run your own node, bro. Like, oh, what do you mean? Well, run your own node and you won't have to trust anyone. Like, it's quite promoted from, anyone from the first step they come into the community. This is why. We're not trying to trust anyone. It's an important concept to understand, and the places where you're placing that trust changes based on what they want you to perceive. Yeah, so you're perceiving that you're using this trustless open source blockchain as Ethereum, but are you also perceiving that your access to this blockchain is trustless and not through third parties that just want all of your information and data that you're putting through their node?
It's unfortunate that this stuff isn't talked about, in mainstream media, but I can see why it isn't. It isn't in the powers that be's interest for the general public to understand all this stuff. That would remove their access to controlling you, telling you who you are and what you are.
There you go. They might not be able to control all of your inputs. DERO network, we're not saying this can be all end all to everything, but hell, it might be able to help you control like equivalent to, 50 or 70% of your inputs. Well, that's some of your autonomy you're getting back. That's some of your outputs that you just spew out, all of your beliefs that, you might actually be able to form your own beliefs. And that's ultimately what I think the last hour, what we're trying to get at.
A lot of these concepts don't really make sense in a short-term view, but over time, imagine the psychological impact of having the majority of the world using systems that are based on surveillance to function. How do we even divide individuals up? There comes a point where it's hard to even believe that half the people you talk to on a daily basis have even formed their own opinions because everything is one giant information feedback loop. And everybody is told who and what they are and what their worth is. Pretty funky stuff when it sinks in,
Yeah, it literally is like your output is the sum of your inputs. Well, what the fuck are you inputting? Ultimately, like if you don't do your own study and like click around on your own, and you only just do what everyone else does, like that's spooky. It's spooky. Ultimately,
Yeah, I usually think about how the majority of us enter into this meat suit and we are given by, our external environment, kind of like a default belief system. And should you never actually venture from that and strive to learn and do your own research and think for yourself, you're always going to be able to be controlled because you're in that default pattern and you really don't know what isn't your beliefs. I was like scrolling Instagram and I realized that there was like a meme once, I don't know, like 6 years ago. And it had all of my beliefs. And I decided, I was like, if you can be summed up in a meme, then you are definitely the victim of social engineering. And it's time to start, going back to the drawing board and really seeing who you are and what your authenticity and your truth is. And that's why I think that DERO is so pivotal, because not only does it protect that data, but it forces you to really do that research and kind of recover a little bit of your own autonomy and your own soul essence.
I think what you're touching on is the concept that expands over time in a person's lifetime, interacting with these systems. If you could imagine for a second, 10 years down the road of using only DERO for communicating, for finance, even routing services, any of the things that we do on a daily basis. If you used only DERO, you would effectively be living in some separate bubble universe from the rest of this monster of data that we created. It's profound stuff. There's a lot of philosophical points to be made.
And you'd probably be perceived as quite weird and strange, right? to everyone else that just, lives in the system that isn't, DERO in this instance.
Kind of like a breakaway civilization.
This monster of data that I'm talking about is kind of like this dark cloud that's looming over humanity, you're looming over our entire existence, and nobody has control over it. No single person can control it, but it controls us because it has its own inherent properties when it's all combined and configured in the way that we've done this and built this thing that we call the internet. I would say it's dangerous because as a species, using this form of information control over time, we've given up our own individual sovereignty to something that isn't even human in nature, When you have a thought in your head, that thought is private. When you receive information from this dark cloud about who and what you are, and you believe that and you integrate that into your identity, then you're a drone. You're not even a human anymore at that point. You crossed the line of function where now you're functioning as a product of information that is being fed to you instead of information that you store for yourself to use to interact with the world,
If you've ever been watching a TV show or something and you've been like, I think where they got a lot of it's very strong in music. It's like, if you've ever said oh my God, that's me. They've got you. You know? Oh my God, that's exactly how I feel.
Right. It's so crazy.
Oh man, they fucking got you by the curlies,
Yeah. And even down to this very moment, because so many people through science fiction or whatever in the movies that we see in Netflix and are scared of the singularity and the evil AI. But then at the same time, now there's like this whole other mix going on where they're maybe trying to make AI more friendly. But the conscious people, at least, they're not exempt from this because they're also like, oh, blockchain AI bad. But actually, we're already experiencing what we're scared of is that this entity, this centralized entity, this data processing thing is constantly informing us how to exist and express ourselves. So we've already lost. And that's the thing. It's like, you can be scared all you want of blockchain, crypto, or DERO. At the end of the day, we're already in that what we are scared of. And DERO is the only way that we can begin to pull ourselves out of that.
It's terrifying. There will probably be books written about this stuff in 10, 15 years once it all starts sinking into the people's minds,
If data is the individual bits, then you put those bits together and it's information. You control the information, you control the knowledge. And then you control the knowledge, you control the wisdom. We see that Dalai Lama is all for on board with the World Economic Forum. He's supposed to be wise. It's from the base layer and it comes up through. It's a big system and it's been made for a long time.
I think the long-term effects of something like DERO, like I was saying earlier, it lets us all exist in this separate bubble universe from whatever this monster is. I think over time, as it gains adoption and more users and more implementations on this platform, it'll start becoming very obvious, at least to the users of it, on just how separate they are from people that don't understand these things. It kind of creates like a psychological division. Interesting to think about.
It's crazy. And then when you get into the DERO community, you can see a lot of people come in and there's immediately a lot of resistance because they don't really understand, haven't comprehended how we operate here. And they don't understand how we're so, I don't know what it is, nonchalant about issues that are major issues to them. And you can see how, you have the real world and then you have blockchain, when everyone has the basic blockchain, we're infinite money printing and all of this stuff. But then all of these prominent figures in blockchain who are so separate to the legacy system and the legacy people, and they understand great concepts that need to be understood, but then they're totally isolated and broken off from the private people, the people that understand fungibility, the people that understand trustlessness. You can see how the breaking up it works brilliantly because in blockchain, DERO is an outcast. It's fucking crazy. You know, like Bitcoin and Ethereum people do not understand the concept of fungibility. They cannot.
It sounds like the way they perceive the word fungibility is like they think it only means 1 unit means 1 unit. While that is the basic meaning of what that means, it expands to thousands of different parts about the way our mind works and how we interact with the world. It's just crazy. It doesn't stop. Obvious. It doesn't stop there with just money, you know?
Yeah. So, you know, I can't remember where we were going with this, but yeah, it's, you know, I just wanted to make the point that even within blockchain, and, you know, you think you've solved and learned so much by just, you know, you're a hipster by getting into blockchain. Well, you're really not there. You know, I wasn't there when I got into blockchain. You know, I was lucky enough to find DERO. And since finding DERO, I've learned so much. It's been phenomenal. But that's because I understood the message very quickly of Captain, of Azylem. I love how they are. You know, it's no bullshit. It's straight to the point. What is what is. And there's no point hypothecating on the future or, you know, on money or value of money. It's none of that is a thing here. It is what is in the now. You know, when you either learn about it and verify for yourself or, well, nothing. I suppose, you know, zooming out, like the DERO community inspires sovereignty. We're not going to fucking help you. Learn yourself. Learn why we think like this yourself. And eventually, I think Azylem can most definitely, you know, say something about this, is watching people come into the community and then looking at them 6 months later. And they get it. You know, they completely change.
Once you realize some of these things, there's no going back. Like, it is comical because I've probably seen a good few hundred or at least 1,000 people come into the community with all these assumptions on how things work and start saying the things that they want to see, and then they're met with immediate resistance, like you said. And at first, they act offended. They act like we're a toxic community. A lot of these people have stuck around, and it doesn't take that long, like a few months of learning, asking questions, even in the face of that resistance. And then suddenly they become the resistors. It's like, once you get this stuff, it's like,
it's everything.
You're freeing yourself, you know?
There is no in between here. You either want to be your own man or woman or you don't. You either want to place trust in third-party entities that are not yourself, that you do not control, or you don't. You either want to learn yourself or you don't. We're not going to be there for in between.
And a lot of that has to do with what we were talking about earlier, being told who you are from this massive data cloud. The majority of people in the world, that's all they know. That's their entire worldview. That's what gets challenged when they start entering these dialogues and pressing for information. They think they're being resisted or they think people are being toxic, but they're not. It's just, you can't go back once you understand a lot of this stuff.
Yeah,
it changes everything.
Yeah, you can imagine it's tough because, you know, you get into blockchain and you're like, oh, this is amazing. Oh, XRP, they're going to replace the whole financial system. Yeah. You know, and then you find out, you're like, oh, what's this Monero over here? Oh, look at them all cloaks and daggers, you know. Fungibility. Oh, my God. Privacy, you know, and you learn about that and you're like, wow, yeah. Fuck everything else off. Nothing else matters. And then, like, you're about Monero and then you find DERO and then you find out that even within privacy or anonymity, it's like, how is it achieved? So you know, you get into a layer of the onion that's even deeper that you didn't even suspect was there because I only just learned about fungibility and privacy and how important it was. That you can't be fucking right. You can't be better than what I just learned about. Or, you know, you can't think you are at least. So there's just so many layers to this fucking blockchain onion. It's phenomenal. I love it. I love learning about it. You know, yeah, it's brilliant. You know, you meet phenomenal people. Yeah, I guess you just get to learn things that no one else knows because DERO is the only thing of its type. I'll give you an example. When I came in, I had to learn everything on my own. So everything I know, I've learned from scratch. Like that's my whole shtick. I'm the objective alpha. I'm objective because I don't do computers. I don't do blockchain. None of that. Yeah. So my viewpoint is what it is. In X amount of time, I've got to DERO, and in the X amount of time, I'm telling you that fucking DERO is the one. Objectively, because I'm from nothing. I don't know otherwise. So I love it. I love learning about it. I love the people. If you're grumpy, that means you're honest. And DERO has a lot of grumpy people. It has a lot of honest people.
Maybe that's a part of life experience that drives people to start seeking these things out, is some sort of unhappiness with the status quo, knowing there's something wrong and not knowing quite what it is, and they start looking.
That's like a self-initiation, being unhappy with the status quo and having that little voice inside, like, there's something not right here, and then going and searching. And I feel that same way about the DERO community. It was really hard adjusting at first because I'm so used to, my communities that have real sweet, fluffy words, and they express themselves.
How are you today? Did everyone sleep well?
Yeah, exactly. Totally.
Just this fuck off.
I know, right? And it was like, I was confused at first. I think also you guys are just used to a bunch of bots that pretend to be women. So you're just like, yeah, get the out of here. But one of the things that I've been really grateful for since being in the DERO community, I feel like the amount of education I've received, either by my own, trying to go and research myself, but that doesn't really work too well because I'm not like you, Alpha, where I can just go read these documents and put it together myself, but mostly from getting mentorship from you and Azylem and a few others in the group. I feel that out of everybody that I know in crypto, in my communities, even the ones that are just shouting from the rooftops and still shilling shit coins to their communities, I feel really bad for their communities because I'm like, dude, I'm over here getting an authentic education in crypto. And if you're still thinking that crypto is about pumping your bags and getting all this money, I think you're on the wrong path, because I feel that the true mission and purpose of crypto is to pump your right to privacy. And really, it's not about getting rich quick or even getting rich at all. It's really about your principles and what you're going to do with your data and protecting it. I've been in a few crypto communities, and I always kind of gauge bullshit by, if you're in the community and you can't nail down a single thing of truth, it just keeps like all this fluff talk continues to grow and grow and grow. And, we got to do charting and, technical analysis and all this silly stuff. There's no methodology to it that makes simple sense. I'm like, that's probably bullshit. But in DERO, while it's confusing as hell too, you guys are giving actual reasons that finally, in my confused crypto brain, make sense. And that's one of the most relieving things I find about your community.
What you're describing also encourages more people to go out and discover the truth about things that they do and the way they interact with the world. I think that's important.
Probably the DERO community being quite unique inspires people to stick around and keep poking and prodding. Why are they so staunch in their beliefs or their why are they so staunch in their knowledge? It's possibly because we've come across something that you haven't yet, or we've thought about a concept in a way that you haven't yet. That's the only nuance to it.
So we're getting close to the last half hour here, and I'm hoping that we can kind of cover some of the more practical things and some of the more maybe an invitation for people to join DERO and how they can participate in DERO. Let's go over some of the simple kind of hot projects that are out there and some projects that you both are doing. We can close it up with that. And yeah, what's the things that are most exciting to you on DERO right now?
You asked what the most interesting ones that I'm following and looking. I would say, yeah, mostly what the civilware guys are doing. The Ngram wallet, for example, is it's based on the core code in Golang. with the GUI slapped on top that allows the user to seamlessly use different part of the DERO core, the wallet, daemon, and even the miner. Those are actually 3 independent applications in the core code. And the Ngram wallet lets the user just click and use any of those things independently all in one place, which is awesome. This lets users pick local node, for example, in the settings menu. And all they have to do is launch the Ngram wallet, and it automatically fast syncs a local node. So they don't have to trust anybody. They have their own local computations going on. And then it also integrates a few other things that Civilware is working on, such as the Nomon indexing contract and package. So what that accomplishes is it lets people on the network permissionlessly register headers for their contracts with the Nomon contract, so that the Nomon package can read it and know what those contracts are, or what they define themselves as, like their name, their icon, their description, what their purpose is, and also the smart contract ID. This also lets people put headers in their contract that Nomon can pick up as a package in apps like in Ngram to give the user more access quickly to those contracts without having to dig through and scan the network. Nomon does that for them. Another thing it lets people do or exposes to users is the username registration, which is cool because that's actually also a contract. It's kind of like a token. The name is a token, and the name acts as a forwarding address. So people can talk to and send funds to each other, talk to each other with messages that are also exposed in Ngram using those usernames trustlessly, which is cool because there's no centralized authority providing any of these connections. It might sound simple on the face of it, but that's unheard of in the rest of the industry. No other platform has features like that don't require third parties. That all feeds back into things like being censorship resistant, being trustless, being private. And all these users can easily have access to that stuff, even mining and supporting the network.
I don't think people really wrap their brain around that, but like using the private messaging was like a spiritual experience for me, you guys. Like I literally I messaged Azylem like 20 messages in a row. And I was like in tears just for the fact that we forget how important it is to be able to communicate completely privately and not be surveilled. And the fact that you can register your name right on there and the human readable addresses, like, my God, it is so, so nice. And I feel like it's relatively user friendly. Anyways, continue, Azylem.
Another thing that I believe Civilware is getting close to putting out there is the Artificer platform. A lot of people in the crypto community are infatuated and obsessed with their NFT art, for example. There's a lot of problems in my mind with how NFTs function on other platforms, being tokens that are smart contract controlled and not natively held in wallets like we were describing earlier as native assets on DERO. This requires a lot of trust and a lot of third parties and a lot of different connections to let people play with these things. But on DERO, for example, the Artificer NFA standard allows a user or an owner that owns an asset to perform any functions that they want with that asset, like selling it, auctioning it, without trusted third parties, which is really cool. I've already put a few out there, those NFAs, that give some examples of how they can be used.
Do you got any of your art handy? Can you share your screen maybe, or show us a couple of your NFAs?
You can view them on derostats.io, actually. Some of them are on the top 50 contracts list there. You can look at them and click on them and look at the icon and view the code.
Azylem's the most active one on the DERO blockchain.
Yes, he is. I'm looking for him now. Can we see the actual art, or is that like private?
No, you can see the art. If you click on one in the list, you can see all the URLs that are assigned to that asset too.
Yeah, we can shout out Zoz. You know, DERO Stats is fucking phenomenal. Very cool.
I'm going to share my screen so that we can show the good peoples. There we go. Let's do it that right there. Okay, here it is. Okay, so these are like the 50 most popular smart contracts. I love that we even have this. So it's still the name service, right? Because that's like on Ngram. And then we've got, let's see, where's yours?
Scroll down to the bottom there.
Uh-huh.
I don't want to pitch or pump my own stuff there. I love doing this stuff because it demonstrates different things that we can do.
Mhm.
And there's a great developer in the community. His name is Six of Clubs. He's using all three of these asset types that I put up there so far in his card games, which is really cool to me. I wasn't expecting that when we first started doing this stuff, and it's just kind of evolving that way.
He was in disbelief when I first said to him that Six of Clubs said that might be possible. And, you know, if you're hearing it here first, yes, this great developer, Six of Clubs, is making it so you can use your NFT playing cards whilst sat at, let's say your poker table. Actual use and function of these non-fungible assets.
I've never seen that before.
I've never seen that before. It was a great idea, and I was like, "Wow, that would be cool." And I think Azylem was the same. Like, yeah,
like up until 3 months ago, I was one of those guys that would say, NFTs are the stupidest thing I've ever seen in my life. It's just
me too.
But starting to see the actual uses of them, it's like, well, maybe there's some cool stuff here we can do, and we've all been talking about it and seeing where we can go since then.
Also, too, I think you guys touched on Six's poker and the DERO. You guys have gotten to play already, yeah? How was it?
It's great. You're playing your layer 1 blockchain, encrypted blockchain poker. If we contrast this with any other poker that you play online, they're always through, a centralized private company, PokerStone. This is DERO, layer 1, trustless, blockchain crypto, private.
I mean, even that's unheard of. Any poker game in the world relies on a trusted dealer. And here you are, and now you have a game of poker in front of you that is based on consensus, which is crazy to think about.
Consensus.
That doesn't exist, and it's private, so you can use your assets, and I don't know, it's pretty cool.
Everything goes back to your private encrypted account. That's your wallet, and that's never decrypted. No one can ever see in there.
It begs the question. I mean, if we can do this with poker, that just makes it obvious. There's 1,000 different ways we can leverage this tech. Just simple things that make all the difference in how it works because it's trustless and private.
So, okay. I think we've got 20 minutes left, and I've got a very interesting question that we mentioned before. You said that using DERO is also in the interests of the worldwide powers that are to allow for such an encryption protocol. Do you mind sharing why? I'm so curious because we never got into that answer.
Well, there's a lot of ways of looking at that. Governments primarily run their own backends, their own networks that are inherently vulnerable because they're only as secure as what their centralized security can provide. It's an interesting concept. This goes back also to the earlier question, why hasn't blockchain taken off? If you think about it for a second, when you have all these isolated sub-networks all over the world, government networks, corporate networks, enterprise networks, and then private personal networks, all these things are only as secure as what their owners can make them. And not everybody's a superhuman. I mean, it's not like you have your own super intelligence watching over the security of your network. Something like DERO is, in my opinion, is in the interest of corporations and enterprises and governments to use, because we all have the same goal as individuals at the end of the day, which is data security, data availability, isolation of data via privacy, isolating different bits within groups. These things aren't really possible in a global consensus manner without a blockchain. DERO lets them do that. Another thing to think about, even if you're just talking about financial world, let's take a smaller country, for example. We're all kind of forced to participate in global financial market. And this kind of inherently means that the people at the top have the most control in this giant pyramid scheme, and all the smaller players in the game inherit the effects of what the major players decide to do, which is weird, I would say. That kind of impedes on sovereignty, in my opinion. Having a platform like DERO to rebase finances on kind of levels the playing field, financially speaking. If I was a country, let's take Canada, for example. You hear all these people talking about central bank-backed cryptocurrencies. The idea of putting fiat on chain is good insofar as until you get to the point about who controls it. So at the end of the day, current models of using CBDCs are more dangerous than the current fiat system in the sense that they are controllable by the centralized authority, which kind of ends up being a sort of social credit system because they control it and they can do whatever they want. And it gets really weird really quick when assets aren't in the individual's custody. They're just a token that represents an asset on a blockchain. If you were a country that actually wanted to digitize your fiat system, DERO is the ideal platform to do that because it doesn't impede on a person's sovereignty and it doesn't impede on the nation's sovereignty either. So in my mind, that would be the ideal goal for a fiat currency.
A good example was El Salvador. Let's say Bitcoin didn't have the deficiencies that it does with regards to fungibility. What are you going to do to that country? How are you going to attack them? With economic hitmen, etc. What are you going to do to them to destroy their monetary policy if their legal tender is Bitcoin in this instance? Well, you're not going to do anything. You're not going to inspire infinite money printing because you've driven the country into chaos like Venezuela. You're not going to be able to do all of these things that have effectively been done for the last 100 years.
What El Salvador is doing is, in my mind, even more dangerous than issuing some sort of centralized CBDC because they've relinquished control to the Lightning Network, which is even worse than using Bitcoin. Because now you're just adding trust in order to be able to even use it in a user-friendly way. If I was El Salvador, I would take what they've done and move it to DERO. And if they did that, then they would achieve their goal that they set out to do effectively.
Yeah. They'd be
and
unfuckwithable,
unfuckwithable, yeah.
Because, when countries attack other countries, it's generally to affect monetary policy or at least monetary strength. Because if you can bring down the currency, you can bring down the trust in the currency, you can bring down the nation, right? So if you can fix the money, then, you can fix a fucking lot of stuff. You can make yourself very strong.
That's just finance too. So then you can go into enterprise applications, for example. Like all the logistics of the world are also based on trust in ways that it probably shouldn't be. Like, for example, if you order something on Amazon, you're sticking your name and home, phone number, and address on that box, and everybody that touches it knows who you are, but you don't know who they are. So this whole direction of information is so tweaked in the real world that everybody knows more about you than you do. Gets real quick. Whereas if you use something like DERO in an enterprise application, you could actually build out a proof of custody system or like a chain of signatures system that is enforced and proves the history of anything that you want to use it for in logistics. It's just, that's just something that's simple.
After all this information, DERO is and you guys said this the last time we talked, is that it's actually a candidate for a trustless private internet protocol. So in a lot of ways, we can move away from this concept that DERO is just a blockchain. Really, I think what you guys are laying down is that DERO actually has the potential to be a whole new internet. And I really like how you talked about having multiple DEROs. And I would love to close it out with that and some thoughts about where you see that going in the future.
You mean multiple chains?
Yeah, you were talking about how if DERO, what would a world look like if DERO was the main private internet protocol? And yeah, and you even mentioned having multiple DEROs, we could have multiple DEROs running. How does that all tie in together and where do you see it going?
I mean, even Captain has offered publicly, if there's any nations out there that would like to spin up a DERO network, feel free to ask and he'll help them. The reason for this is that the developers of DERO understand that this is very important technology, and the quicker we get it into the hands of the people, the better the world will be. There's some cool things you could think about. I wouldn't like to call it layers of DERO because they're all layer one if you spun up more than one network. But in reality, what you can kind of imagine, if you spun up 1,000 DEROs, for example, and they all have like DERO 1, DERO 2, DERO 3. Like, they're different DERO worlds, for example. And each one of them has their own independent instancing of all the history of contracts, the history of assets. You can even run them with modifications. Imagine a DERO network without the virtual machine, for example. So it wasn't spun up for running assets. It was spun up for communication only, or spun up for services only. There's a whole lot of different ways that this can go down the road, and all of these chains would be inherently interoperable with each other. You could, in theory, run one as part of our internet backbone for routing if you wanted to.
Wow.
The DERO network is very malleable. The DERO, homomorphic encryption blockchain protocol without the virtual machine on it, right? So just A to B transfers was a thing. And it was a thing before that. And, it was put to the community at some point. What do you want to do? A smart contract's going to obviously take away from certain aspects, but it's going to allow us smart contracts and all of these things. DERO's got technologies on the back burner that ain't even used that probably would make everyone very happy. Something like that got brought up recently was anonymity of the sender. And, could we do away with ring signatures? Well, yes, without, from my understanding, yes, that was the option. Without smart contracts, without the virtual machine on top of the DERO network, addresses would not have been visible. They would have been encrypted. But we had to obviously do away with that due to virtual machine interaction.
To keep them auditable, yeah.
Yeah, so just to let people know, before we go, like, probably anything in your wildest dreams, don't you think Captain's probably already studied it and thought about it? Yes, it's there. And it's probably as it is for a reason. A well thought out reason that's been well thought out for a long time and has been so well thought out that someone doesn't really want to fucking talk about it. That's basically it.
It's a lot of steps back for them to even describe why they made some of the decisions, probably.
But so DERO network is very malleable, very usable, and I think I saw Captain say something recently because I was thinking in my head, like, you know what? We could have a parallel non-DVM DERO network just for fucking payments with fully encrypted addresses and senders, so you don't know anything. It literally is, when you look at it, a sea of ciphertext, and you have no clue what's going on at any time.
You could even
go on.
And with that services only chain that you're hypothesizing there, it doesn't even need to have any of its own supply. The supply can be burned and reminted crossing chains. Like going from DERO World 1 to DERO World 2, you can in effect have the exact same assets across chains, but they're only on one at a time.
Yeah.
There's a lot of weird stuff that gets cool real quick.
Yeah, like genuine minting and burning of the same thing, basically, not wrapped. Like that kind of concept.
Yeah.
If you just take away all assets and everything, and there is just native DERO.
Yeah, who knows where this goes? I mean, I think we're just getting started.
I think Captain from every, like, he is. It's hard to describe, especially for people listening. Like, this man or these men, whoever the fuck they are, is so knowledgeable in contextual knowledge, like knowledge across multiple areas and concepts, but is also just both focused on cryptography and data privacy. Like, yeah, it's tough. Ultimately, you got to put your trust somewhere. I think, and I've never seen a single thing that makes me doubt, Captain and the mind and the principle. Yeah, I'm happy here. I'm comfortable. Yeah, I think everyone else should be as well. It feels like home, right? We're all probably on a long road, especially the ones of us that have become aware of how things operate. It may seem alone, a spooky world, but I hope that this place, Captain, and the people that have surrounded him, Azylem, like me, I hope we're reasonable. we're real people. We're reasonable, and we're here for a reason. I enjoy everyone. I enjoy everyone's company, even the pedantic, pessimistic ones. At the end of the day, it's just two sides of a coin. You cannot know a thing without knowing its opposite. Everyone provides a purpose, and everyone is here for a purpose.
Beautifully said. And I echo your sentiments regarding the DERO community. And, I am not bright enough yet in regards to DERO to really understand the brilliance of Captain, but I can feel it. And I can speak to his compassion and just his morals as a being, like watching him interact in the chat and, in DMs and whatnot. Just a sweet, sweet soul that I think that most people in the community probably just instantly kind of identify, even at a subconscious level of like a father figure. He's just beautiful energy. And I don't even care who him or them is. I'm just grateful that they had whatever foresight to create this potential solution for all of us. And yeah, you guys, I just want to close out also with, where would you recommend if anybody's interested in getting involved with DERO and wanting to learn more? Where do you recommend they start? And where can people find your work?
I would say, obviously, number one place is DERO.io, the website. It does genuinely list out, most of the features and, just the general, overarching theme of DERO and, what it provides. Beyond that, obviously, there's the documents page, docs.dero.io. That's obviously a good place to go. I have done my own writings through what I've been learning. So if you want to learn a bit about privacy and how that is achieved, as in the nuances and the differences between protocols, there is a Medium page called Documenting DERO. You can just put that in Google. You can find that, but that just goes into encryption, obfuscation. It touches a bit on zero knowledge proofs. It touches on trusted execution environments, which is an encryption form that some protocols use. And it just highlights some it's very basic, but fundamental concepts within, air quotes, privacy. And how it is achieved, because privacy is more than just a word, and that's what I'd like to get through to people is it's how, and separating little things like anonymity and privacy. Anyways, that's I'll call that at that.
Excellent. How about you, Azylem? I know you got work out there.
You could throw up some links on the description to those pages that he mentioned, and maybe some of the graphics that I got up there on the forum. Awesome. And I definitely challenge people to join the Discord and interrogate us. that helps all of us learn at the same time.
Totally.
Yeah.
All right. I'm adding the links as we speak, and they'll be in the description box below. Oh my goodness, gentlemen, thank you so much. We had a little bit of a rocky time on my end over here. I think I lost cell signal for a solid 30 minutes there. But I'm grateful that you guys were able to keep going and to hold up the conversation on my behalf. And I'm grateful that you're willing to share and teach. You guys were officially like the first two people, well, maybe maybe one or two other people as well. You guys were definitely the first two people to kind of take me under your wing and have tolerance and patience for my infinite amount of questions. And probably you had to like repeat yourself repeatedly. So I'm really grateful to you guys. Thank you for helping me learn in this journey and for giving your time so generously today, 2 hours worth for recording. And I'm very happy and I look forward to doing the next one if and when that day comes.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, no, the more we're here, the more comfortable we'll get. So, thank you.
Yeah, and the more I'll learn as well. And by proxy, hopefully all of our viewers and listeners.